Welcome to Beyond the Battlefield, Stories of Mountain and Air, a podcast that delves into the diverse and compelling careers of Vermont Guardsmen. I'm Senior Airman Emily Sorrell with the 158th Fighter Wing. Each episode of Beyond the Battlefield features a candid conversation with current military personnel of the Vermont National Guard and the Vermont Air National Guard. These members will share their personal experiences, lessons learned, and the impact of their service on lives and communities. Today, we're talking to Major Jacob Dubie, an F35 fighter pilot with the Vermont Air National Guard. Major Dubie, how's it going today?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. So, are you flying at all today, or are we holding you up at all?
No, not today. I'll be out there again tomorrow.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So I got a couple questions for you today. I was wondering, so how long have you been a fighter pilot? I think it's been almost a decade now.
Yeah, just about. I started flying the F-16 in about 2016 and then switched over to the F-35 in 2020. So about 8 years total flying fighters.
Awesome. And what were you doing before that?
So I was in college prior to that. So I actually enlisted in the Vermont Air National Guard back in 2011 while I was simultaneously going to college at the University of Denver. When I graduated from college, though, I applied to be a pilot, and then I was in really pilot training leading up all the way until I was flying F-16s back in Vermont, and then eventually F-35s.
Nice. And can you tell us what made you decide that you wanted to be a fighter pilot in the first place?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've wanted to be a fighter pilot, honestly, most of my life. I grew up right here in Essex, so about 10 minutes from the base. And I remember seeing the F-16s flying over when I was playing like Little League Baseball as a kid and thinking, this is so cool. I have like my own personal flyover for our Little League Baseball games. I also had a lot of family that was in the National Guard. So my grandfather was a full-time member of the Vermont Air National Guard. I had a couple uncles that flew airplanes in the Vermont Guard as well. And then my brother is also a Black Hawk Army pilot in the Vermont Army Guard. So aviation's kind of always been a part of my family, and it kind of always was what I wanted to do as a kid. But I went off to college, and I kind of put that on the back burner. I was studying finance out in Colorado, and I was kind of like, I'll figure out how I'm going to be a pilot later on in life. But at the same time, a lot of my friends who also wanted to be pilots were, joining the Vermont Guard, the Colorado Air Guard, and I was like, I'm going to get left behind if I don't start now. So I took a year off from college. I went to basic military training and to technical school in order to learn how to work on the F-16, working on avionics, so the radars and the radios and those types of systems. And then eventually was able to come back, then go back, finish up school, and then get selected to be a pilot here.
I love that. So it sounds like you went from being a finance bro to a fighter pilot bro. And honestly, there was another pilot I was speaking to. I only know his nickname, Arrow.
Yes. You
guys kind of have a similar experience. You grew up here and you wanted to become this, and seeing it growing up, it just must be so heartwarming for you, that you actually were able to do it. It's pretty impressive to me. And the other question I had, from what you were just telling me, what is the training like to become a fighter pilot? I know you said F-16 and you went to F-35. Did you do two separate trainings for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the training starts a little bit further back. So the first step is that you're going to go to officer training school. So to be a pilot in the Air Force specifically, you have to be an officer. So first you'll go to officer training school, which is at Maxwell Air Force Base down in Alabama. It's about 8 weeks long. From there, you'll move on to your first step of pilot training. From start to finish, it's roughly about a 3-year process. So you'll start out really just doing academics, learning the basics about aeronautical engineering, about weather, and about how airplanes actually work. And then you'll finally get into a simulator. And after about 3 or 4 weeks of that, you'll finally get into the air flying your first airplane. So you'll go through flying the T-6, which is a trainer-type airplane that the Air Force flies. And then you'll move into the T-38, which is a jet trainer. All throughout that, you are learning, just basic takeoff and landing, how to fly from point A to point B. And then eventually you'll move into flying instruments. So pretending like you're in the weather, you can't see outside of your airplane, but you still need to safely take off your airplane, get from Burlington down to Boston and back, for an example, and then land your airplane safely. And then finally, you'll move into formation flying. So flying as close as 3 feet from another airplane in the weather, doing turns and stuff like that. And that's all just to build your confidence and your proficiency as a pilot. From there, you'll move into your actual fighter airplane. So for me, that was the F-16 first. And that's about a year-long school. I went to the basic course out at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, and that is roughly a year. You get about 100 hours in the F-16 doing both simulators and flying the airplane. Then once you graduate from that, you'll come back to, for me, that was to Vermont, and flew the F-16 here for about a year. Fast forward 2 years from that, then we started switching to the F-35 here in Vermont. So I went back to the transition course, switched over, which is about a 4-month-long course for me, just because I'd already been a fighter pilot.
It's not so bad.
Not so bad, yeah. And then I was able to get back here to Vermont, and now I fly the F-35 for my full-time job.
So as an F-35 pilot, a lot of our community doesn't really understand what goes into it. Like, a lot of people think you can just become a pilot. You just explained like a little bit of it, but can you tell us what really goes into your flights, including like after your flying is done, like the breakdown from that?
I get this question a lot. A lot of people are like, hey, what do you actually do up there when you go fly? And you can't really start there because it seems like we take off, we go out, we come back around an hour and a half, 2 hours later, we land, we go about our day. But there's a lot that goes into just that 2 hours of flying. First off, there's a ton of academics that you need to do prior just to understand the scenarios that we're going out there to accomplish. You also have to study a lot about our threats. So the adversary airplanes, adversary surface-to-air missile systems, there's a lot of things that we need to study to understand how we can go out and actually execute a game plan. Okay. From there, after you've done all that academic study prior, then you'll get presented a scenario. So basically, it's what is our tactical problem for the day that we're trying to go out there and solve. And you'll spend literally 12 hours the day prior to your flight mission planning what the game plan is going to be to actually go out there and execute and solve the tactical problem for the day of, there's a target here that we need to get to with these threats. How are we going to execute as a team in order to go out and accomplish that mission? Once you've gone through all of that mission planning process the day prior, the next day you'll come in, you'll brief for about 2 hours prior to your flight. So basically what that is, hey, we're going to do a walkthrough of the game plan. We're going to talk about everything that we need to do, what each person is responsible for in order to go out and execute, and then answer any questions and make sure we're all on the same page prior to actually walking out the door and going to fly. Then for the very short 2 hours that we actually are up in the air, we're executing that game plan that we just briefed. And then we'll come back, we'll land. And unfortunately or fortunately, the day doesn't really stop there. Typically, we'll still debrief for a handful of hours. It could be as short as an hour or two, depending on if it's a basic mission set, or even sometimes the debrief will last longer than the entire brief and flight combined, and you'll be there for about 6 or 7 hours debriefing a very complex mission. And what we're doing is we're basically recreating and watching everything that we did. So an easy analogy for that is, after a football game, the team dissects the tape. They watch everything again that happened. We do the same exact thing. So everything that we do in the F-35 is recorded. And so we'll go back and we'll be like, hey, this is the decision you made at this time. Why did you do that? And then the person will answer, I did it for this reason or that reason. And then we'll figure out, was that a good choice or not? And if it's a good choice, I'm like, hey, that's what you should be doing next time you see a similar scenario. Or if it was a bad choice and somebody simulated died out there, be like, hey, maybe you should think about doing this instead. And we'll come up with our lessons so that next time when we go out and execute a similar scenario, we can hopefully win, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. So, coming from security forces, a lot of the use of force scenarios that we do, it's being able to articulate the decisions that you made. And it seems very similar to that on probably a much more complex level. And it does seem like a lot of work, but it does make sense. Being a very, very complicated aircraft, I've got to understand here too, what sets the F-35 apart from other aircrafts? While you're training, I know a lot of people will say an F-35 definitely will not win against an F-16 in a dogfight or something, but it's so far away by the time it detects this, that it's just not, it's over before it started. So like, can you kind of delve into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a very common question of, hey, I hear an F-16 will beat a F-35 in a dogfight. The F-35 has a lot of very advanced sensors, and it's also a stealth fighter jet. So the only two stealth fighter jets that the Air Force has is the F-35 and then the F-22. And what that does, just in a general sense, it makes it difficult for other radars to be able to detect the F-35. So no, we're not an invisible airplane, but the whole point is to delay the detection. And so in your example, if I was to go out and fight an F-30 or an F-16 from a far distance away, ideally I would be able to shoot that F-16 and then shoot him again before he even sees where I'm at, before we even get to a dogfight, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So the stealth is definitely something that sets the F-35 apart from other airplanes. Additionally, just all the supercomputers on the airplane. We have so many different sensors that all go into the computers on the F-35, and it presents the pilot a lot of data, i.e. information that increases our overall situational awareness of what the battle space looks like. So compared to a lot of older airplanes, it does not provide the pilot that information. And so we have we're working with better information to make better decisions for when we're out there executing a mission.
Nice. And I've heard some of the other members of the VTANG talking about how the F-35, once it's on the ground and maintenance has to come over, it basically just tells you what it needs done. How true is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not an absolute expert, if you will, when it comes to the exact maintenance processes, but it definitely can self-report its problems, and it'll basically punch out a code. So if I have a problem with, a flight control system or a generator, the airplane itself will basically, the supercomputer inside that we were talking about, will plug out a code and says, this is what's wrong with me. And then the maintainers will check that code. They'll figure out what needs to be replaced. And then they can very quickly go out and, fix the problem with the airplane. But the airplane itself it's very reliable. It's been a really, honestly, an awesome airplane to fly because things break relatively infrequently on it, just because it is also such a new airplane, which is pretty lucky for us to be able to fly here in Vermont.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way you're it just tells you everything that it needs done. You wish that babies worked the same way.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you. How do you feel about being a Green Mountain Boy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall, I feel honored to be part of such a high functioning team, both in the Vermont Army and the Vermont Air Guard over the past handful of decades, contributing to the state and national missions that we're both tasked with. It's humbling to be surrounded by so many amazing people. So I think that's probably my answer.
I totally agree. I mean, I've only been in for 3 years, so very small compared to you and others. But the sense of camaraderie and family and sense of power too that I get from being a part of this community, it's just so intensely humbling. I never could have imagined my life being
absolutely.
Like this, yeah.
It's cool to see the different backgrounds. I mean, there's people who are from all over the state who have chosen just different paths, and you have so many different experiences that everyone brings to the table. So it's cool to see that as well. And every single shop is full of people just with different stories.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to give you a fist bump because I know the studio's a little hot. Sweaty hands. But anyway, thanks guys for listening to Beyond the Battlefield, Stories of Mountain and Air. We're glad you've joined us as we tell the stories of men and women who have served and protect at home and abroad. Again, I'm Senior Airman Emily Sorrell, and we'll see you next time.